going to tell you a story from the Makah Nation. And it's a story that every small child knows very, very well, because it's one of those stories to where it's not funny, it's almost scary, but it's more of just grow up to be a good person, otherwise bad things will happen. So, once upon a time, there was this girl named Sedbury, after Berry, I don't know why. And her mother asked her to go out with some of her friends and go berry picking, but to make sure that she was back before dark, otherwise Ishcus would get her. And Ishcus was this very, very tall woman, and she was Sasquatch. And she would always go around with a basket on her back, and how the basket was built was it was made completely out of cedar, and then it had one large strap that would come up around and it would attach on the forehead. And she would come around and she would convince the children to climb into her basket, and then she would stuff pitch in their eye to where they couldn't see at all. So Sedbury was out picking berries, and it was getting close to dark time, and she wanted to go back, but there was just a few more berries that she wanted to pick. So they stayed around just a little bit longer, but by that time, it was already dark. So they started running back home because they didn't want Ishcus to get them. But obviously, she found them. And she told the children that she wasn't actually a bad person, and that those were just myths told by the people, but she was actually a very nice woman. And that's the other thing, is Ishcus was ugly, 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 and she had probably the worst stench possible. And her hair came down to about there, and it was dark and scraggly. And so she was telling the children that she wasn't bad, and if they climbed into her basket, then she could get them home a lot faster, because her legs were so long, and their legs were only tiny, because they're children, and she's a Sasquatch. So the children agreed, and once they're inside of her basket, she says, okay, now, I'm sorry, but I need to stuff pitch in your eye, otherwise, so that if the townspeople still don't like me after we help you go, you children help convince them otherwise, they won't know how to get to me. So the children agreed, and she stuffed pitch in their eye. But instead of heading towards town, she headed towards her house. And about an hour went by after dark, and Sedbury's mother and all the other mothers started worrying, and they started crying. Now, Quati, who was Sedbury's brother, he heard about this, and Quati was born from a clamshell, and he was found on the beach by his mother and taken home to be raised. And Quati has eternally been around the age of 8 to 10. And he's always the hero of these tales, usually. So Quati goes out, and he goes hunting for his sister, and he stumbles upon Ishcus's house. And he sees Ishcus, and he just thinks she's the most repulsive thing ever. But he decides that there's just a cliff a little bit over, and cliffs around that area, it's not so much like 20, 40-foot drop, it's more like 200 foot. So yeah, and it goes straight down into the ocean where it's just jagged rocks and crashing waves. So Quati goes over and he meets up with Ishcus, and he tells her that she's the most beautiful woman he's ever seen, and he's like astonished by just how pretty her face is, and he wants her to see that she's never seen. So he brings her over to the cliff and says, okay, now just look over the edge so that you can see down in the waves off the moonlight. And she looks over, and because it's dark, and with the waves, she couldn't really see her face. So Quati said, okay, just lean over a little bit further. But she still couldn't see her face. Okay, just a tiny bit further, and you'll probably be able to see that. And as she did so, Quati pushed her over with all of his might into the deep ocean, and she fell to her death. So then after that, Kwati ran back to Ishcus's house and rubbed the pitch out of all the children's eyes. And after that, he took them home, and everybody was safe. And those children knew never to stay out past dark, otherwise Ishcus will get you.
Yay.